Hello, and welcome to AV 101. In this six-part series, rAVe and NSCA have partnered to give you the basics on the ProAV industry. I'm Megan Dutta, Director of Emerging Markets at rAVe, and today I'll be joined by AV experts who will discuss the fundamentals of displays. But first, a special thank you to our sponsor, TD SYNNEX VisualSolve, who makes this series possible. Now, let's meet our panelists. First up, we have Rich Ventura. Hey, Rich.
Hey, Megan, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Can you give us a quick overview about what you do?
I jokingly tell everybody I do very little. So I run Sony's North America organization for the B2B space for ProAV. So large format displays, projectors, direct view LEDs, and cameras.
And next we have Alexis Lebroy. Hey, Alexis.
Hey there. Thanks for having me, Megan.
Thanks for joining us. And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So Alexis Lebroy, I work for PRG, Production Resource Group, based here in the DC area. We're B2B audiovisual equipment rental company, Broadway, live TV, theater. We do a lot.
And we have Jeremy Caldera. Hey, Jeremy.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
The weather's turning very slowly, so I'm happier about that.
Yay. And tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm the Senior Vice President at Pearl Technology, and we are a systems integration firm. So mostly commercial, no residential.
Nice. So let's get into it. Alexis, we'll start with you. Can you give us a brief overview of how you got into the world of displays and how you work with displays in your current position?
Yeah, sure. So going back to when I started as a technician, I was thinking, thinking back on that time. I remember we had these big, huge, well, at the time they felt huge. They were probably 26 or 40-inch monitors, but they were CRT monitors, so they were huge, they were heavy.
Can you explain what a CRT monitor is?
Oh, the cathode ray tube monitors, the big monitors with the big tube on the back. So they would go back about a foot behind the actual screen, and they were heavy. And so it's not like the flat monitors that we have today. We used to have to transport those from the shelves to the tall 54-inch cart. It was a whole team lift effort kind of thing until you got the hang of it and you could do it by yourself. But that's how I got introduced to displays many years ago when I was a technician. What I work with displays now is it's a lot of LED. It's a lot of the flat screen monitors for rentals for our rental customers.
And Jeremy, what about you?
You're going to have to ask me that again because I was distracted by the fact that she was explaining what a CRT monitor was. And I feel really terrible that that's how old I am now. And
So how did you get into the world of displays and how do you work with them in your current position?
So, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, when we got into this, it was I'll talk signal types, right? We were doing composite video, S video. We were doing RGB, HV for computers. And if I say that to my technicians now, they have no idea what I'm talking about, which baffles the mind, right? Same thing with CRT. And, oh man, you could transfer that over. Did you know you could do an S video over a category cable? Right? That was mind blowing when I started in the industry. And I know there's people out there listening that are looking at me like I'm 12, right? Because they've got even further years back than that, right? But then if you think about it from the technicians I have today, right? They only know flat panels. They only know LED technology. Even projection starting to go that route to where it's the generational shift, right? That we're going to start seeing that go away at some point, maybe. But for me, it was just that. It was just like Alexis was doing, and now it's integration of, again, the stuff we love, the direct view LED, right? The super bright, super small form factor, more efficient, way better than projection, and those ultra thin flat panels. That stuff that's wallpaper thin now, which is just crazy thinking back what we had when I got into this.
And Rich, you live and breathe displays. I feel like
it's not a fair question for him.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you got into working with displays and what you're doing with them now.
Oh, so this guy drove by in a truck and he said, "You want a really interesting job?" and threw me a couple bucks. So I've been in this industry It's what, 22, over 22 years now in the display world. So I started selling those CRTs back when we were selling 14, 15, 17 inch up to 22 inch. And then back when you used to be able to buy a 14-inch LCD display for about $1,000 and 22-inch desktop displays for $10,000. So I got to live and breathe through the whole transition that the world's really gone through, where we started with CRT and then we moved to desktop LCD and then plasma. Don't forget about plasma. We had plasma come out, and then finally we came out with large format LCDs. At the time, that was 32-inch, 40, and 46s, and we thought that we were pretty amazing. And then you started seeing the 85s and the 120s and everything else, and direct view LEDs. So I've gotten to live and breathe through all of those transitions from the display side of the world.
So we're going to go back to the basics. And Alexis, I want to start with you for this question. This, for anyone that's been working in AV for a long time, may seem like very obvious, but people that are new to AV might not understand. What is the difference between a TV and a display or a monitor? Why are we always saying display, monitor instead of TV?
Well, I go back to, when I was first working with displays as well, is the one of the ways that I would think about the difference between a TV and a display, or a TV and a monitor, is a TV had a tuner in it. And now, you think about using a tuner on your TV. We don't use that too much anymore. Everything is connected through a box, if it's your cable box, or if it's, your, whatever, however you're connecting your conference system to that display. So that was what I thought about, initially when you asked this question. Now what I think about is the difference between a consumer and professional. Consumer TV versus a professional monitor, professional display. You have differences in brightness, you have difference in refresh rate, you have difference in how long the displays can be turned on, and like in a digital signage application, can be turned on for 24/7, versus TVs are meant for much smaller amount of time being used. So there's a lot of differences between consumer and professional as far as that goes as well.
Yeah, they're definitely not meant, TVs are not meant for 24/7 usage.
No.
People think they are.
Right. Even the warranty, for consumer versus professional. You have a lot of customers who they say, oh, I can go to Best Buy and get this. And it's like, you can, but your warranty won't be the same with a professional display. And you can't use it for the same amount of time, especially in those digital signage solutions. And you're going to end up buying another one and another one and another one. So why don't you just get the right display for this application the first time?
Right. And there are so many different types of displays. And so, Rich, you work for Sony, which is one of the top display manufacturers. I'm sure you would say the top display manufacturer. Can you explain the different types of displays and how we use them?
So the easiest way to go through that is to first not even talk about the displays, but actually talk about the applications. Applications drive the types of technology and displays you use. For example, if you have an extremely large venue space, odds are pretty good you're going to use a direct view LED or even projector, because of depending on the palette you're looking at. Versus if you're looking at something more in a kiosk, smaller size screen, or it's price driven, or it could be a collaboration type display with touch on it, you're going to look more at an LCD. So really, applications drive that's the first thing. It's like, what are you trying to do? That helps define it. When we look at display technologies, you really have, I always lump everything into four spaces. You have traditional displays, non-traditional or unique shape displays. You have projection, because projection is still there. It's even though Jeremy sucks about his engineers aren't used to it, projection still has a pretty long, healthy life. And then
we actually are going to have a whole episode on projection coming up.
And then you have direct view LED, right? So when you look at LCD traditional display, it's a rectangular shaped display. it's going to range generally in the large format space. You talk 32 inch to about 100 inch. And those applications could be signage, kiosks, conference room, boardrooms, anywhere you want to get information up on the screen. Non-traditional are going to be your odd shaped, your bar shaped panels, your 86s, your 43s, your 48s, all these odd shaped ones that are usually designed for specialty areas like in an airport. They generally go digital signage. Projection, really it's all laser based. So now you got everything from a little projector like about this small to an extremely large projector doing a true 4K. Direct view LED is the big product now. That's the one everyone talks about. And I always use the example of think of Legos or building blocks. You're taking those structures and you're building your shape. And the great thing about LED is it can do any shape, any curve, any design you want it to do. It's all based on your application.
So sometimes we hear the term LED, but then we hear direct view LED. What's the difference?
So if you ever hear the term LED, that means the lighting source on an LCD display. That's just the lighting. When you hear direct view LED, that is direct LED lighting. So if you think about LED walls, and I direct view LED walls, what you have are the little panels, and they have little red, green, blue lights, the diodes on it. That's direct view LED. Now you will hear this other term which throws everybody off, and that's direct lit LED. And that means that you have LED lights behind the LCD module of a display that's directly lighting on the glass versus edge lit. We can thank the industry and how we don't like to really make it easy for everybody to understand the differences. And it's been that way forever.
Yeah. What about indoor versus outdoor? Because, we'll see, obviously you walk into, let's say, a lobby, you'll see there's a video wall there, but then you walk through Times Square and that's all changed. That's all digital. That's all video walls. What are some of the differences between indoor and outdoor display technology?
So going back to the application, you need to really worry about a couple of different things. One is you got to worry about direct sunlight. So you have to have something that's bright enough to combat against direct sunlight. The second thing you have to worry about is solar load. So you get the heat from the sun, whether it's directly on it or in the back of the case. So it has to be able to support against that. Then you start talking about the elements, waterproof, splash proof, and then you also look at vandalism proof. People do like to hit these displays. And then even infestation proof with animals. So the products are designed specifically for it. You can't walk into a store, buy a beautiful TV, go take it outside and expect it to last more than a few days, because either rain's going to destroy the electronics if they're not sealed, or brightness is going to take it out, or you're going to get the neighborhood raccoon or squirrel decide it wants to live inside the display. So they're specifically designed for those applications.
Yeah, and that goes back to your point, Alexis. You can't just go to Best Buy and be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to pick whatever TV I want and it's going to work for my outdoor digital signage application.
Yeah. And a lot of people, it's a lot of education around what we do, and just trying to explain to people that it really does depend on your application, what it is that we would recommend for them for an install or for a rental. And just a lot of education to make sure people get the best product for what they're trying to do.
So Jeremy, let's jump to the install side of things. So you're ready to do a project. What factors go into choosing the right display? So
I'm going to echo everything Rich said in that it's all about application, right? It's 100% application, right? At least for us as a designer, and kind of echoing on Alexis, right? Education is key, and educating my clients why I'm choosing the displays I'm choosing is sometimes a challenge, right? Because they're so used to, let's just throw something up, let's buy something at Walmart. Why is it priced this much money for a 65-inch display, right? So for me, it's a lot of, number one for me is what's being viewed on the display, right? Are we talking about PowerPoints? Are we talking about video? Are we doing Excel sheets, spreadsheets, accounting stuff? Are we doing detailed, AutoCAD? Let's start there. Then stepping back from there, it's is it conference calls? Is it just presentation? What's your furthest viewer in the room, right? So we dial that back to say, okay, if the room's 30 foot deep, but your furthest viewer is only 17 feet away, right? Well, we have standards written that help us determine, based on whether you're doing basic viewing or analytical viewing, what size of a display you actually need, right? So that helps me determine what screen size I need. And then from there, you can step it up to, okay, now we're picking different types of formats, whether it's, well, anymore, it's just you're some kind of flat panel, but it's always going to be a commercial grade flat panel. But is there a 24/7 application versus a 16/7 application versus a use for meetings just throughout the day, Monday through Friday, right? That'll determine kind of which flat panel we end up starting to choose. Do we have to have people and content on the display? Do I need multiple displays, right? Do I need interactive whiteboarding and annotation? Because then that brings in, touch interactive displays, right? Sometimes we're still doing confidence monitors, and even if you're not using projection, you can do it with displays. But in this case, we're saying, well, let's do a 2x2, so 4 55-inch flat panel displays stuck together as a video wall, right? Well, then you got to start talking about how big the bezels are between the video walls or between the displays so that they look a little bit more seamless, right? There's a lot that can kind of go into all of that when you're choosing, again, application, house of worship versus conference room versus digital signage, right? All three of them are kind of there. And then even a step up from there is, do we use projection or direct view LED or something like that, right? And that comes down to, again, size, application. And then when you choose that, there's a whole snowball effect of what happens of the other gear you have to pick on the back end of that, right? Similar to an audio system where, you figure out what your application is and what type of speaker system you're going to need. You work backwards from there with all the other components that you need to drive, that reinforcement. Same thing with video. You need to pick the display you need and what your content is and what you're doing with it, and then kind of work backwards from there. At least that's how I personally do it. So.
Yeah, and Jeremy, don't forget too, it's also your environment you're putting it in.
Yeah, yeah.
If your wall can't support an LED, for example, you need to put a projector there, right? So that's even going to be the piece I think everyone forgets is they forget to also, can the environment actually support what technology you're putting in?
And it's that, even with that example, right, it's not only structural, right? Like, can I support the weight of that, but can I support the heat that's going to come off that and dissipate that out of the room, right? Yep. Can I support, do I have the power, like, to support that, right? It's not just sticking a 120 volt, 20 amp circuit on the wall for a flat panel TV and a chief box or something, right? You're talking about 6 circuits or whatever you need, depending on what that video wall might maintain, right? You go to projection, okay, cool. You're projecting onto an air wall because there's no infrastructure, but now you need power elsewhere. You got to deal with screen, sunlight glare from a window.
Yep.
Again, outdoor versus indoor, right? Vandal proof versus non-vandal proof. There's kind of all those applicable things that come in when we're, choosing that right display. And it's not just that, it's that education as to why, right? And how you do that with your customer.
And can that display play the content you want to play?
Mm-hmm.
That's the piece everyone also forgets, right? They go, I'm going to put this display up. Oh, wait a second. I have 8K content, but I have a 2K display.
And that gets really tricky when you start talking direct view LED now too, right? Because now, I'm a big fan of, and we can get into a whole nother webinar about this, right? But, pixel to pixel, 1920 by 1080 resolution content on a 1920 by 1080 true pixel LED wall. To me, I'm going to prefer that over something where I'm, scaling in some way, shape, or form, right? And then that gets into a whole other animal of your content, right? And pixel pitch and all that other stuff that goes with that. So again, it's not just application. Content kind of drives some of that application too, but it's that coherence of all of that stuff together. And, arguably why you hire companies like ours, right? To come in and do that versus go to Walmart.
So Alexis, one of the things you do is rental and staging, which is a little different than standard integration. How are you choosing displays for that?
We are, it does go back to application. It goes back to what the customer wants to do. It goes to the size of the room. It goes to the audience. It goes to the goals and objectives for their meeting, for their event, for their conference, for their virtual, well, not virtual, but for for whatever it is that they're doing. And really trying to make sure that, in a space, in a large space, we're not suggesting displays, monitor displays. Maybe we're suggesting LED, if it's an outdoor space, we're suggesting, maybe something that's a little bit higher pixel pitch than what they would have inside of a conference or ballroom. But then we also have to make sure that it's rated to be weather rated to be outside. So lots of different considerations. What happens if it's a sunny day? Has to be bright enough for a sunny day for people to still be able to see. So all of those things kind of come into play, as well as what is their budget. Some items have a friendlier budget than other items do, and we'll still get them the same results. But maybe they sacrifice one thing for the budget, or maybe they have a bigger budget and then we don't have to sacrifice something else on the other end.
Let's go back to something, Jeremy, you were talking about, which is the components that go along with this. So yes, we're talking about displays, but there's also so much more. Like, for example, how do you get these displays on the wall? What happens? Like, I mean, I know we all know the answer to that, but for people that don't, Jeremy, we'll start with you. You have a display. How do you get it on the wall or on the floor, wherever you're going to do it?
I mean, the most basic and simplistic standpoint, right, is it's got to go somewhere, right? So if you're hanging it on the wall, you need some type of wall mount, right? And if you need a wall mount, you can ask yourself other questions. Is it flat? Is it tilting? Is it articulating, meaning it comes out from the wall? Is it an air wall? So now we got to hang it from the ceiling, right? And need some kind of structure above. Can we not hang it from the ceiling? So we need a floor stand, right? And that needs to be able to not be tipped over. You have to think about things like ADA compliance, right? If you're in common walkways and things like that, you need a super thin flat panel and a super thin wall mount because you can't be more than 4 inches off the wall, right? So you got to start thinking about all of those other things like that. And if you are not ADA compliant, well, now you need physical structure below the display to be ADA compliant. There's all these kind of different things that come into play there with that. So it's that's the physical mounting of it, right? But then you start thinking about other stuff, right? Now you need to power it somehow. So where's your power going to go? Who's going to provide that, right?
And are you working with other trades on this?
Yeah. So typically as the AV contractor, we would come in and say, okay, we need power. The TV is going to go exactly right here. The mount's going to go exactly right here. We'll provide you with a drawing, but we need power right here too. And then we'd give that to an electrician who would then come in and put the power in where we need it. They might also put in a regular box with a piece of conduit that goes up above the ceiling or down through a floor box, because think about it, if I'm hooking something up to this, I got to have an HDMI connection, possibly a USB connection if it's a touchscreen, to go somewhere else and connect to something else, right? So if it's a laptop in the room, I got to run an HDMI cable or a converter cable of some kind. And so you got to have that cable pathway as well. So it's not just physical mounting, but it's power, it's pathway, it's ADA compliance, it's all this other stuff that kind of comes into play when you're talking about that.
Let's talk a little bit more about how we plug things in, because people, that if you're familiar with technology in the home, you only know HDMI. Rich or Alexis, what are some other ways that we get signals into the display?
Well, I mean, HDMI is pretty much the common standard nowadays. You do see USB-C now. But also the big change that we've seen in the industry in the last few years is system on a chip. And that's the embedded computing without even having anything external. You also have the ability of sending video over Cat5, Cat6. So there's no more of the days of VGA and DVI-D cables. And it's really gone to the simplicity nature. Some are using DisplayPort. Does have a little more secure of a connection, whereas USB-C and HDMI can pop right out because they're not locked in unless you put the cable ends that latch in. But we are seeing a lot more of that onboard computing with either system on chip, or some manufacturers have done open pluggable computing platforms inside their displays.
Megan, when I was working in integration, one of the things that we were looking for was how many HDMI ports were there, how many ports of different kinds were there on the displays, and so that way, to Jeremy's point, whatever content you're running onto that display, it could potentially live right there at the display versus having to be needing a pathway to run to somewhere else. So just again, depending on what it is that they're trying to do, we can have some different options for people depending on how many, what are the different types of inputs and outputs on those displays too.
So what about content? How am I getting, so I have, my HDMI cables plugged in, or I'm using the system on a chip. How am I getting content onto the display?
Well, it's all going to be based on your content management platform, right? Or how you're doing it. If it's digital signage, then you're using a content management platform that's running either natively on the SoC or on an external computer. If it's doing Zoom or Teams, you're running through a computer either that's on board the display, or could be plugged into the display, or running through a control system like Crestron Flex, or Kramer system, or AMX, or anyone else. So the one thing I think that's changed about that, how we run content is, it used to be you had to plug in 50 different devices to your display. Now you can plug everything into one device, and that one device becomes the gateway, the highway, so to speak. So that screen could be running digital signage when it's not being used, because it's using the onboard SoC. And then when it's being used, it's running through a Kramer system or a Crestron system, running a Teams room environment. So that's the beauty of the way displays are designed now, is we have that ability of taking the inputs from multiple ways or running it natively.
And Rich, you talked a little bit about this earlier, but I want to get slightly more into it, about like what's 4K versus 8K. We hear a lot more about, and we've heard even like 12K. What is the difference between all of that, and what is the most used?
Reality versus dream. In reality, there's really not much content that's above 4K. And even if we think about it, 15 years ago, we were talking about 4K, and this whole massive transition away from on TV signal was going away from traditional HD to full HD, Ultra HD, so on and so forth, that we're still seeing signals that are not 4K. It's just based on how many pixels you're using, right? So it's your resolution of your screen, and less than, I would garner to say less than 5% of the installations out there are above 4K. And generally, if they are, it's because they're a really crazy, funky direct view LED wall that is less about maybe a single file and more about the environment that it's sitting in. Perfect examples, like if you walk into Salesforce's lobby, the waterfalls that they have over the elevators that's all LED, that's not 4K. That's like, I think they said it's a 16K file. It's basically 4K files stitched together because of the breadth, the width that whole
application,
wall.
Right?
Yeah, it's all application, right? But it's still a dream. There's also there's very few, if any, systems that actually can deliver 8K or 16K or 12K content.
But I dial it back a step further, and we're putting in 4K displays, but I'm not even driving 4K content.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And a lot of times I'm talking people out of 4K content, right? Now it depends, again, application. Signage you want to do 4K looks great. Some video playback stuff, great. 8K for medical simulation. There's all this other specialty stuff, right? But if you're in a boardroom and you're looking at an Excel sheet and you throw that out 4K, right? You have to be like 5 feet from the display, depending on the size of your display, right?
Yeah, they're going to zoom in. They zoom in.
Right. Or you have to zoom in, right? So a lot of times what we're finding is you even though it's 4K, and I get clients who call me all the time, I need to have a 4K projector in my boardroom, right? You really don't, right? You really only need a WXGA or, something like that, right? Just because the pixels are so small, right? The higher the Ks, right? For those people out there, right? The higher your resolution, right? The smaller those pixels are, the harder it is to see, right? So you have to get closer and closer and closer, or you have to blow the image up, and you're not even taking advantage of said 4K display. So again, it's not just the physicality and the features like 24/7 and heat load and all that other stuff that you're doing when we're picking out displays. It does have to do with resolution, and it has to do a lot with content. And again, a lot of times you don't want 4K, right? You still want it to be dialed back, so it's something that's readable and manageable in a standard presentation type format. And again, I agree with you, right? Even 6, 7, 8 years ago, there wasn't a lot in 4K available, right?
Yep.
And now it's everything, right? Even TV at home, right? Netflix, everything else, all 4K, right? So,
yeah. We can thank COVID for that, because people were at home more and they were forcing that content to come over. And a lot of creative people were working from home more, and they were creating content in that resolution. The other thing too with 4K, the conversation about those resolutions, that's people got to remember. Let's go to direct view LED. The finer the pixel pitch, the smaller your wall can be for 4K. The higher the pixel pitch, the larger your wall has to be for 4K. So if someone wanted to put a 4K, say 2.5 millimeter LED wall in, that's going to be a monster LED wall and more likely much larger than the space they are going to in versus a 1.2 millimeter or a 0.9 millimeter wall. So it all goes back to, everything we talk about goes back to the earliest part of this conversation. It's all about application, and the space and what you're trying to accomplish is going to dictate what you do.
And Rich, just for those that don't know, can you explain the difference between all the millimeters and the pixel pitch, what you're talking about when you say that?
It's just the gap in between. It's the gap in between the pixels on the LED walls, the LEDs themselves. So it's that gap between your lights is what dictates the pixel pitch. The higher the pixel pitch, so like a 2.5, a 3.5, they're very big dots. So you have to be further away. They're designed for further distance. So the lower the number, the closer you can get. And the easiest thing I tell everybody is, if you look at a traditional LCD display, that's roughly 0.7, 0.8 millimeter pixel pitch. So an LED wall to look just like your LCD, extremely tight pixel pitch, and allows you to get really close up to the screen and look at the beautiful 4K dots that you've put up on the screen.
I think that's the big reason why you don't have as much direct view LED in a boardroom or a conference room, because you can just do a display, a monitor for that space and get the same resolution, better resolution for a lot less, and it just looks better. Yeah.
Okay, so before we sign off, and Alexis, we'll start with you. What is the single most important thing new AV professionals need to know about displays?
I think that one of the things that they should do is just do some homework with what's available and what's available. If it is a monitor, if it is projection, if it is direct view LED, just do a little bit of homework before going to a site visit or before talking to a customer, so that you'll be able to know some options for that customer that will work better for them for their whatever their scenario is.
Rich?
Don't get lost in the beauty of the screen. Focus more on the ability. Too many people see these beautiful displays, and we all do the ooh ah when we walk into trade shows. Learn about actually what the display does and why it's used and its applications. Just don't fall in love with the first screen you see, unless it's Sony.
Jeremy?
On the most basic level, learn the difference between consumer versus professional, right? And learn what prosumer is, right? Because even I use some of that nowadays too, and that really weird term, right? That's the most basic thing you can do. But I think fundamentally from there, properly sizing your display is a key thing, right? So understand how your content and display size versus what your furthest viewer is drives what size display that you actually need, because that's going to be critical in most applications, right?
Do you guys have any resources you can share about the fundamentals of displays where people can learn more?
There's a lot of great resources out there. There's a lot of industry consultants and speakers and presentations are out there. So we see stuff, everything from what's been presented at Infocom and what's presented at Digital Signage Experience. What you see from people like the Bronze and a lot of the individuals that I know Jeremy and I've known for many years who do a lot of training. There's a lot of great resources out there from that perspective, but also I think engaging with the SSEs that a lot of those manufacturers have. I've got 4 of them, and they're unbelievable wealth of knowledge.
Can you define what SSE is?
Sure. SSEs are sales support engineers. So we use them in a lot of our pre-sales discussions with our customers and our partners. They're unbelievable wealth of knowledge. That's their job, right? They're educators. They are technical educators, and there's a lot of those individuals out in the industry that are amazing knowledge base.
Alexis, do you have any resources you can share with us?
I can tell you, when I'm looking for a solution for a customer, I look at the websites. I look at the manufacturers' websites a lot, just to determine, is this the right need for my customer? Is this the right size? Is this the right, pixel pitch if it's direct view LED? I look at that a lot, and a lot of times I'll send that to the customer so that they can, take a look at it with me and sign off and just make sure that we're all on the same page. So I look at the manufacturers' websites a lot.
Jeremy?
I agree with Alexis. I mean, there's a collective everywhere you can go to get education on this stuff. There's webinars all the time. There's these kind of events that we do. There's trade shows. There's stuff manufacturers put on. But I mean, even myself, a lot of it's self-taught, right? So you have to, you just have to know where to look and what you're looking for, right? You need to see through the marketing fluff, right? And get to the cut sheet, right? And find out what's the details on there, right? Because the cut sheet will be king, right? Can something be landscape versus portrait? Is something 24/7 or 16/7, right? Just the raw data and the raw stats are there, right? If you can get, like I said, get past all that marketing stuff.
Yeah,
that's huge, Jeremy. That like the portrait versus landscape. I mean, that can really screw you up if you haven't paid attention to just that one detail.
Yeah. Yep.
And I would say also don't be afraid to reach out to people like Alexis, Rich, and Jeremy, me, to ask, hey, I just need more information about this. I need an opinion. I don't understand this. I still don't understand direct view LED. Can you explain it to me? And I think there's so many people in this industry that love to talk technology and love to explain technology. So don't be shy and reach out to any of us. So let's start. How can people find you, Jeremy?
Anybody can email me, jeremy.caldera@pearltechnology.com, or on the Twitterverse, which is at Jeremy_Caldera. LinkedIn, Alexis. Facebook, all that jazz too.
Alexis, what about you?
Same for me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter as Alexis Labroy, LAB, B as in boy, ROI. I'm also on Instagram as Alexis Labroy, but I'm still working through that whole thing. Like, what do I do on Instagram?
Don't you have a show with us? Let's get
I do. Yes, I certainly do. And I have
Never thought I'd say this, but I feel so old sometimes.
Right. Like, where do you go? Yes, and I also have the show Alexis AV Talk that's also on rAVe. So yeah.
And Rich, what about you and Sony?
So Twitterverse at the Rich Ventura. I do the Rich Ventura because everybody's used to my old Twitter handles. LinkedIn, for Sony, it's our Sony Pro website, and then really just engaging with us in the field at events and at conferences.
You can find me on Twitter at Megan A. Dutta and follow me on LinkedIn. And be sure to check out nsca.org and ravepubs.com for all of the latest ProAV news and research. Thank you again to our sponsor, TD SYNNEX Visual Solves, who makes this series possible. And thank you for joining us. And be sure to check out our next session, Control Systems 101, which will be hosted by NSCA's Tom LeBlanc on June 13th. Thank you again to our sponsor, TD SYNNEX. The Visual Solve team unites the industry's top AV, IT, and CE technologies to build the cross-functional solutions their partners need. With comprehensive capabilities covering everything from pre-sales design to integration, installation, and post-sale support, they're your strategic partner. Their industry-certified experts are ready to provide the guidance and personalized training you need to diversify your business. Engage with them today at visualsolve@synnex.com.